meeting of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Baez?
Aye.
Director Miller?
Aye. Here. Excuse me.
Director O'Halloran?
Present.
Director Woodward? Director Woodward? It doesn't appear that Director Woodward's mic is muted, but I can't hear her.
I hear her as well.
Director Woodward, can you test your mic for us?
You can't hear me.
We can hear you now. Yes.
Okay.
We're calling the roll. Director Woodward?
I'm here.
Thank you. And Chair Taylor?
In attendance.
We have 5 present.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our listening audience.
Buenas noches. Esta junta se transmitirá en español a las personas que lo requieran. Si alguien necesita servicios de un intérprete en español o para poder escuchar esta junta en el español, por favor, marquen el 312, el teléfono 312-626-6799 y pongan la clave 982-0841-3481. Les repito, marquen al número 312-626-6799. La clave es 982-084-3481. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I remind members to please keep your devices muted to avoid interference.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Due to the contingencies of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are holding this meeting virtually. Board members are participating remotely and the Central Service Building is closed to the public. However, in order to allow as much public participation as possible, in addition to our normal practice of broadcasting our meetings on radio station WYMS 88.9 FM and live streaming them on the MPS website. We are broadcasting this meeting on the MPS YouTube screen, the link to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. Individuals who wish to speak on tonight's agenda or any item had to register in advance. I ask those who are waiting to speak to remain on the platform until you are called upon to speak. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair of the committee. Also, any questions or requests are to be directed towards the chair, who will determine the next efficient way to address them. All speakers are asked to state their name and spell their last name before proceeding with their comments. Each speaker will have 2 minutes and 15 seconds to speak. After a speaker's time is up, they may continue to follow the meeting at one of the broadcast options mentioned previously. To ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind, including inappropriate language, will not be tolerated. The chair reserves the right to remove anyone engaging in such behavior from the platform. Those removed from the platform may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. However, he or she will not be allowed to rejoin the platform. Written testimony may be submitted to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201-2181, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email to governance@milwaukeek12.wi.us. Also, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting esb.milwaukee, spelled all the way out, .k12.wi.us. Madam Secretary, what is the first item of business?
Item 1 is a report with possible action on student restraint and seclusion. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent. Do you have?
Yes, good evening,
Comments
Chair
on this
Taylor
item?
and members of the committee. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. In alignment with state statute, we are sharing the annual report on student restraint and seclusion. At this time, I'll ask Mr. Matthew Boswell to provide an overview of the information and data that is before you, and after, we will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you. Mr. Boswell?
Yep, thank you, Dr. Posley. Once again, good evening, Chair Taylor is a member of the committee, Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of the Department of Student Services. In 2020, Wisconsin Act 125 created sections 118.305 of Wisconsin State Statute, which provided direction on the use of seclusion and restraint with students in public schools. Act 125 has several key components, including conditions for the use of seclusion, conditions for the use of physical restraint, notification and reporting requirements following the use of seclusion and restraint, training the use of seclusion and physical restraint, and requirements for the use of seclusion and restraint on students with disabilities. In March of 2020, Wisconsin Act 118 revised the state law. Some of the changes included requiring parents to be provided with a copy of the written incident report, clarifying that the notice and reporting requirements apply to incidents involving law enforcement officers, prohibiting the use of prone restraint, revising the required training components, requiring school staff to hold a meeting after each incident of seclusion or restraint to discuss topics specific in the act, and conducting an IEP team meeting within 10 days of the second time seclusion or restraint is used on a student with a disability within the same school year, and requiring each governing body to submit an annual report to the Department of Public Instruction by December 1st. So overall, last year in 2018-2019, we had 1,021 incidents of restraint or seclusion. This year, administration is reporting for 1920, we had a total restraint and seclusion, a number of incidents of 844. So it was quite a reduction. Within the item is a detailed amount of seclusion and restraint for each identified school. I just want to point out some outliers and discuss how some of those things was addressed. So some of the schools that we highlighted was Curtin Leadership, that had 30, Garland that had 43 total restraints, and Milwaukee Parkside that had 75. In our current practice and our detailed assessment of such use, upon checking why some of these schools may have had a higher restraint or seclusion total than others, we found out that most of the students that were restrained were of special education stature and was classified as either EBD, autism, or OHI. A large number of the restraints or seclusions was for children that was in grades 3 or lower, and large majority of the restraints or seclusion was personal care restraints or seclusions, which clearly means there's a child that's 2, second grade or third grade, 6, 7, 8 years old, that if not restrained would hurt themselves in some way. In one case, the kid would run out of the building several times. Staff had to seclude or restrain the kid for personal care and safety. So I just want to kind of make that clear. I feel personally that our principals have done a good job, reporting and doing the things that we have asked them to do. Some of our 2002 oversight recommendations would be that we typically would look at restraint seclusions district-wide 2 times a year. In the year 2020, 2021, we would do that 4 times a year. So basically, it would be overviewed quarterly. So just as we did this year, if we see any uptick in issues, we'll be able to drill down individually, like we did at the 4 schools that I outlined, and see specifically, are the kids of special education or regular education nature? If so, what are their labeling? If so, what things have been in place? I also would definitely like to give a positive shout out to and kudos to the special education department upon looking at these items, restraint and seclusion. We also seen that these items was addressed within the kids' IEPs, and they were being dealt with at the utmost professional level by our special education department. Some of the key revisions is, once again, the principal must provide a copy of the written report to the parent within 3 business days of the incident through first-class mail, email, or hand delivery. Parents still must be notified within 24 hours of the incident. The report still must be completed within 48 hours of the incident. And I just would like to touch a little bit on training. As a result of the changes in reference to how it's reported and the actions that must take place thereof, DPI has developed a training video which highlights the revisions to the law, definitions of seclusion and restraint, as well as reporting and parent notification procedures and requirements. Training for administrators has been done and is being done through our LMS and must be completed by August 28th of this year for early start and September 18th for traditional start schools and principal. The new training requirements for restraint will be addressed through de-escalation and CPI training, which is offered through the Department of School Safety and Specialized Services Department. And that really concludes my report, and be more than willing to ask any questions, but I just want to give an overall highlight of all the changes, all of the procedures, policies, and practices that the administration has put in order in terms of working with schools, in terms of assuring that these restraints and seclusions, when necessary, are done in the most appropriate and uplifting way to the student. And just want to make sure that we're following all laws as outlined by Wisconsin Act 125 and Wisconsin Act 118. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do any committee members wish to comment or ask questions? First, Madam Secretary, is there any public comments on this item?
Madam Chair, we have no request to speak on this item, and we do not have any written testimony on this item.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Committee members, any questions or comments on this item? Director Baez.
Yes, I want to first of all congratulate the administration for the what I think is a very good job that they have done regarding this issue of seclusions and restraints. A few years ago, you may recall that I raised issues because of the large numbers that we found in both seclusions and restraints in many of our schools. And I look at the data now, and it's come down significantly. I raised the issue because it seems to me that we have to do everything possible to make sure that that doesn't happen in our schools. I'm still a little bit concerned that a couple of the schools that the administration identify in this process continue to have fairly large numbers of seclusions and restraints. And I urge us to figure out how we're going to deal with this. It seems to me that in some of those schools, the number of non-special ed kids sometimes exceeds, okay, the number of special ed kids. So we are really restraining non-special ed kids. And if we are restraining more special ed kids in that school, why is it that we continue to restrain the same people over and over again? It seems to me that with the interventions that we have and with the fabulous work that has been done in a lot of other schools, that we should find a way of being able to do this right and being able to reduce the seclusion and restraints in those schools with large numbers that are still appear in the data. So I just want to urge the administration to see how we put our multi-tier system of supports to work and do something to bring this down. In some of these schools, the data continues to look a little bit problematic.
Thank you, Director Baez. Administration, any feedback or comments on Dr. Baez?
Yes. Chair Taylor and members of the committee, I agree that we have to find avenues to make sure that we bring these restraints and seclusions down even more than what they are now. But also just to know that a number of times when you drill down and take a look at it, it's the same student. And if a child is a runner, we're trying a number of different things to make sure that child is safe. And anytime that we have to go and bring that child back, we have to record that as restraint and seclusion and let it be known that that was the case. And so, and even, with all of the de-escalation and training that we provide our staff of working with our students, there are some times where, we have to look at some other options and trying to find a way to work with young people. Because truly at the elementary level, anytime a child leaves the classroom, we have to go out and get that child. And so a lot of times if they are not coming and on the directions of the teacher or staff member, we cannot let it be unsafe and they get out into the street. So, but we are looking for alternatives and ways that we can put into place so that that doesn't occur on an ongoing basis. Mr. Boswell, anything?
Yeah, Chair Taylor, members of the committee, just additionally onto what Dr. Posey has always addressed, you also have to remember as well, that is the focus. And as a result, we have put a quarterly a monitoring process in place. Before we monitor twice a year, as I stated, and that in each semester. This year, we will monitor the numbers twice per semester, quarterly, so that'd be 4 times per year. It will provide us the opportunity to provide support to schools and have those conversations with them about other avenues. Like Dr. Posey said, although it has come down, we're going to continue to be focused to make the data even better for our kids. But one of the most important things, what Dr. Posey mentioned, what we find in looking at individual cases, these are acts of personal care, where a lot of times, like you said, our staff is put in a position where they have to restrain kids for their personal care because they cannot allow them to hurt themselves or put themselves in the community where they can be hurt. And I think that the majority of our community and parents will support that. I think that a parent would rather have their children restrained and come home healthy and safe than be hurt. So that was a good sign for me upon our researching these individual incidents, that a lot of them was for a situation of personal care.
Thank you, Director Baez. Any follow-up? No. Director Miller?
Thank you. I want to thank Mr. Boswell for that report and the work that he's doing. I guess I'm a little bit concerned because I'm looking at 6 schools that have 20 or more restraints. For 5 of them, there are many more restraints than there are students restrained. So you're restraining the same student. We have a number, and a number of them are special ed. We have a number of schools with high levels of special ed, but aren't showing that level of restraint. So my question is there a better way for us to share in our interventions and in our work to make this a more positive situation for these 5 schools? And then I have a question about the one exception, and I'll ask that after this. But Mr. Boswell, if you could address that.
Administration.
Yeah. Yep, Chair Taylor, members of the committee. Yes, and when we looked at that, that is a definite fact. But we're also what we've seen in terms of schools may have more special education students, but what we found is the categorical students, like were they autism? Were they listed as being autistic? Were they EBD? And what we did found is typically in schools where you may have units of kids that's EBD and autism, you may have more frequency. Not saying it didn't happen with OHI, it did, but that was the pattern in which we've seen. And that's just a little bit more, I'm not going to say serious, but it's a little bit more cautious approach to behaviors. And you may see those kids kind of act out a little bit more. It may have to be restrained for personal care issues. So that was an outlier that we did look, drilling down, like Director Miller did, drilling down to try to see, those anomalies.
Thank you.
Director,
Oh, excuse me.
Director Miller, follow up, and then I heard you said you had one more question.
Yeah, just no, that's helpful that that understanding is there, because I had what we called EBD at that time. It's called. Did I understand, Mr. Boswell? You called it EDD. Is that a change in the description in the acronym?
Administration.
No, I said EBD.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. So I do understand. EBD work is challenging, but it can be very good. I mean, our EBD kids are pretty smart. They're pretty brilliant children. I guess my other question is, so looking at the other way, there's one school, Morse Middle School, that has 20 restraints involving 17 different students. That makes it look like restraining is like that's a way of doing business, or is that just an anomaly in the data? I'm a little bit concerned about that one. I looked at particularly 20 restraints or more, and then tried to break it down from there.
Administration.
Yes, Chair Taylor, members of the committee. Yes, and actually Morris is a school that we did look at. We didn't drill down as hard as we did for the other schools. So those were some similar situations as well. It was very similar, but it was also some situations in there where we were looking for outliers in terms of where kids did not have to be restrained. So if the referral and everything, communicated with in relation to the restraint, we said that was an appropriate restraint. And looking at the ones at Morris, we saw nothing, no outliers that was inappropriate. And like I said before, one of the things we really are looking at now from the administration side are the restraints and seclusion issues of personal care. And when we can identify that there are issues of personal care, that make us feel equipped, and also make us feel validated that our training and all these other things that we put forth in schools are paying off, and our staff is doing the appropriate things.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, another thing that I would like to add as well, when there is a altercation or fight or whatever at a school and you have to hold children back, and if the adult puts hands on a child to hold them back from a fight or to keep them from fighting, they have to fill this form out. So therefore, the numbers are, a lot of times when you talk about middle school students love to see what's going on. And so therefore, a lot of those kinds of things happen. And when you look and drill down, a number of those students here in this case is not special needs students as well. These are regular ed students that we're talking about as well. So some of those things come into place, and that we have to address and deal with. Anytime an adult have to restrain or stop a child from going to do something that they shouldn't do, we have to complete this document.
Director Miller.
No, thank you. Thank you, administration. Thank you, Director Taylor.
Vice Chair O'Halloran, and right before her, I know Dr. Bosway gave a summary, but there were some changes in reference to the self-restraints, and I don't know if the committee members, and just for the listening public, if you can address those and make sure that they know now that there are some differences that have to be abided by legally and by DPI or the state as well. And then we'll go to Vice Chair O'Halloran.
Yes, Chair Taylor, members of the committee, I definitely can go over the changes. So some of the changes is once again that let me see where prohibiting. So prohibiting the use of the prone restraint position. Requirements apply to incidents including law enforcement officers or if they're involved. Revising the required training components for our staff. Requiring school staff to hold a meeting after each incident of seclusion or restraint to discuss topics specificated in the act, conducting an IEP team meeting within 10 school days of the second time that a special education student is restrained or secluded, and also just requiring that the new requirements on our LMS is viewed by all of our early start as well as our late start school personnel.
Thank you for that. I just thought it was vital that people understand the new legislation that we have to abide by. Vice Chair O'Halloran.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. One question I have, I'll just do two questions. One is, can you give us an idea how we compare as a district with other districts that are similar to our demographics? Do we do more seclusions and restraints than other districts, or fewer, or in line with average?
Administration.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, I think in the past, administration has been asked to do that comparison. We find it extremely difficult, especially when you look into apples to apples in the state of Wisconsin, that is, because no one is our size. However, more than willing to look around the country to see if we can find a school that mirrors MPS and definitely provide that information.
Chair Taylor and members of the committee, we could also look at the Big Five districts here in the state of Wisconsin, to look at Green Bay's numbers, Kenosha's numbers, Madison numbers, as well as Racine numbers, and see how we measure up. I think the last time we did this, we did look at those numbers, so we could check that, and we will get that back to you prior to the full board meeting.
Thank you. Vice Chair O'Halloran, any feedback? And I know you said you had another question.
No, that was, I understand that we're the biggest in the state of Wisconsin. So if we looked nationally or the Big Five, I would appreciate it just to give it some sort of perspective, because it's good to hear that the numbers are trending down, but without knowing the context compared to other districts, I'm kind of out of my element, but I see Mr. Chasen is raising his hand. So I don't know if he would like to speak on this issue as well, Chair Taylor.
Absolutely. And yeah, I saw Mr. Chasen as well, too. I was letting you finish up. Are you done, Vice Chair O'Halloran?
I'll have one other question, but if Mr. Chasen has a relevant comment about this particular issue, I would appreciate his comments.
Absolutely. Mr. Chasen.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. I don't know that it speaks specifically to Vice Chair O'Halloran's question, but I just wanted to note that when we record these restraints and seclusions with fidelity, the numbers as they accumulate can invite scrutiny. And what we don't want to accidentally do is have that scrutiny discourage the accurate and real reporting of when they occur. So I just wanted to commend the administration for providing the climate where it is safe for the schools to report this with fidelity, even if it does invite a little bit of scrutiny that requires drilling down. But it's important that we have that culture so that those numbers are reported accurately. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chasen. Vice Chair O'Halloran.
My one other question was about, so if we're going to be reviewing this quarterly, will it just be reviewed by the administration, or will that be, is the expectation that it's coming back to committee members to review the data, so we see a rolling or throughout the year, we're getting periodic updates.
Administration.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, we are looking at more of an internal control process to kind of take a look at that particular piece. So that is kind of where we have had it, and that's the idea of looking at it with those 4 times to make sure that we are drilling down on any high number during the quarter as we go forward.
Vice Chair O'Halloran, feedback or comments?
I'm good.
You're good. Thank you. Any other committee members have any comments or questions on item number 1? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, I do believe this was just a report, correct?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's a informational report and no action is required.
Thank you. Can you call or read into the record item number 2, Madam Chair?
Item
Secretary.
2. Yes. Item 2 is a report with possible action on services provided to students with disabilities in the least restrictive environments, the LRE. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Administration.
Yes, Chair Taylor and members of the committee. Before you are our quarterly LRE report. Jennifer Mims Howell is here with us to provide an overview of this report, and after which we will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Jennifer?
Good evening, Chair Taylor, members of the committee. I'm Jennifer Mims Howell, the Senior Director of Specialized Services. As Dr. Posey said, the report I have for you this evening is a quarterly report on the least restrictive environment, which requires, to the maximum extent appropriate, that our students with disabilities are educated with their non-disabled peers. Indicator 5 is one of the 17 performance indicators that we report on to the Department of Public Instruction. The Department of Specialized Services, the plan is to educate students with disabilities in accordance to their IEP goals in a regular education environment with their non-disabled peers, no matter the mode of instruction, based on the needs of the child. Indicator 5 states that students with disabilities can be educated with their non-disabled peers. Indicator 5A looks at the students from Milwaukee Public Schools educated in this environment with 80% more of their day with their non-disabled peers. Milwaukee Public Schools numbers is 79.23%, which exceeds the state average. Indicator B speaks to the percentage of students with IEPs ages 6 to 21 that are educated inside of the classroom less than 40% of their days. These are our most comprehensive students. The Milwaukee Public Schools average is 17.8%, while the state average is 7.9%. And finally, Indicator C speaks to the students who are educated in separate schools, residential facilities, or homebound instructions. These are Milwaukee Public Schools students counted in our counts. Milwaukee Public Schools exceeds the state average by having a 0.31%, state average being 0.95%. The information that's been shared with you today is information from our August counts. This is the information that was our early start calendar with a projection of the enrollment of our schools for traditional start. Milwaukee Public Schools is currently in phase 1 of the approved reopening plan, and all the students attending are receiving services virtually. With the help of the IEP, teachers are educating students in their least restrictive environment whenever possible. The current setting, as I said, with their non-disabled peers is virtual. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Committee members, any questions or comments on this item? Quiet bunch tonight. Madam Secretary, do we have any speakers on this item?
Madam Chair, we have no individuals requesting to speak on this item and no written testimony.
Thank you. I have a question, and I'll hopefully make it quick so I'm not talking from the chair. For administration, can you give us the number of IEPs that have been completed to this day, and how many more that we still have to be within regulation as a school district as well?
Chair Taylor, members of the committee.
Yes.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, because the school year has just started, As of September 2nd, we have 15,426 IEPs that need to be completed this school year. We currently are in compliance because the school district has just started its school year. However, there were IEPs that needed to be completed from spring due to our closure. During the summer, we completed all but 623 IEPs that are past due. As of today's date, we currently have 461 remaining.
Thank you, administration. And also, because we are in a pandemic and COVID, can we, for the public and the committee as well, let them know some of the things we have in place to ensure that parents either feel safe with the IEP or other options that are available to ensure that we are in compliance, but that we are giving the services that are needed to students as well?
Sure. Director Taylor, members of the committee, one of the ways that we're ensuring that parents have a voice in the IEP meeting is that we are holding IEP meetings virtually. If indeed parents choose to wait until the school buildings are reopened and we can have face-to-face meetings, that also is a parent's option. We will take that information and we will log it into the system. However, to avoid IEPs going overdue, IEP meetings will be held so that students' goals can be worked on while working in their homes, and the information will be noted and sent to the parent. Contingency IEPs have been put in place so that students can be assured that the services that can be provided during a virtual environment can be provided. Once again, parents are a part of that meeting too, where they will speak about the services that can be. The other thing that Milwaukee Public Schools is doing, when parents need additional support, which could be support with the Chromebook, could be additional materials to work with at home, or a different device for students, that conversation can be had with the IEP team chair, and arrangements can be made to make sure that students have and parents get the support that they need so they can work on their goals in the home.
Thank you for that. I also thought that was important information that the public should know, as well as our parents, if they are seeking assistance, or for our students as well too. Any other committee members, any questions for this item? Am I saying no? Thank you for that. And once again, Madam Secretary, this is for informational only. There's no action that has to be taken. Madam Secretary, can you read in item number 3 for the record, please?
Yep. Item number 3 is a report with possible action regarding the submission of the end of the year report to the Office of Civil Rights, the OCR report. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Administration.
Chair Taylor and members of the committee, in alignment with guidelines set forth by the Office of Civil Rights, we have submitted the required July 2020 report, which is included as a part of this item. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. John Jagman to begin the presentation, which provides an overview of the report, work underway, and next steps. John?
Thank you. Hello, Chair Taylor, Chair O'Halloran, Dr. Posey, members of the committee. My name is John Jagman, and I'm the District Discipline Manager for Milwaukee Public Schools. One of my roles is to manage the implementation and monitoring of Resolution 05-14-5003 with the Office for Civil Rights, addressing our disproportionality of disciplinary practices with Black students across the district, working towards improving district and school climate for all students. Looking at the 5 priorities for success, this work directly aligns with improving district and school culture, developing our staff, and strengthening communication and collaboration. Research then shows by improving school climate, we will align with the priority of increased academic achievement and accountability. In 2014-15, during a biannual review of data, the Office for Civil Rights worked with the district in creation of this resolution. Within the resolution are 10 agreed upon requirements, with each requirement having a variety of activities for the district to engage in. Each year, there are a couple of progress reports submitted to the Office for Civil Rights. Attached to this item, you will find a report from July 1st, 2020, covering all 10 requirements and the work conducted during the 2019-2020 school year. At the conclusion of the 2019-2020 school year, MPS district enrollment was 51% Black, 27% Hispanic, 10% white, 7% Asian, and 5% other races. At the conclusion of the school year, across all MPS schools, overall suspension rates and total suspensions went down. Looking at overall data, 79% of all behavior referrals were written for Black students and 80% of all suspensions were written for Black students. This disproportionality occurs at every behavioral category within the range of 70% to 95% of referrals being written for Black students. Within the data, we also find disproportionality with Black students more likely to receive a suspension over their white peers in most behavioral categories. Looking specifically at school-based suspensions, the average length of suspensions for a Black student is 0.15 days longer than their white peers. There are 753 staff members who wrote 75% or more of their referrals for Black students, and 142 administrators assigning 75% of their suspensions to Black students. A deeper analysis of discipline by race and suspensions is broken down by specific behaviors attached in the report. Throughout the 2019-2020 school year, there was progress made towards the requirements within this resolution. First, there are a variety of additional resources created for schools, staff members, administrators, and students. Some of these resources included a climate improvement toolkit, an administrator's addendum to discipline, a monthly Why Race Matters email, and a Why Race Matters networking site was created with articles, videos, activities, and other resources. Schools implemented and updated to documenting classroom managed behaviors to monitor behaviors and supports over time. Staff members documented within Infinite Campus under PLP classroom behavior when a classroom managed behavior occurred. And then they also documented what support or intervention was used. At the conclusion of the school year, there were a total of 193,000 notes, with 74% being written for Black students. Also, throughout the year, there was a variety of professional development opportunities for staff members, administrators throughout the district. All PD opportunities are available through the Learning Management System, or LMS. Throughout the year, 99 school principals attended the full 2-day Introduction to Restorative Practices. 162 staff members attended Foundations of Restorative Practices. 117 staff members attended Classroom Organization and Management Program, or COMP. 92 attended De-escalation, and 85 attended Why Race Matters. Additional professional development enrollment can be found in the attached report. Throughout the school year, students and community members had the opportunity to engage in two-way conversations and action planning. There were 4 community conversations held in the evening at 4 district sites, as well as a presentation at the February District Advisory Council. A student leadership summit was held on October 8th, 2019, and the spring summit had to be canceled due to COVID-19. Overall, recommendations and concerns from the staff, students, and community can be found within the attached report. Some overarching themes include consistency of messaging, consistency and fair application of discipline, further engagement of student and community voice, professional development for staff members, conversations around race, bias, and systemic racism, and others that can be found in the attached report. Each school has a PBIS and building intervention team supported by one of the PBIS coaches assigned by region. Each school ensured teams met monthly and had specific discussions around data, supports, systems, and interventions as outlined in their meeting minutes created in Qualtrics. Each traditional middle and high school also had a student discipline committee that met twice a month to discuss student concerns and recommendations for policies and practices, as well as to dive into student-centered lessons and conversations. As a result of this work and an analysis of end-of-year data, reviewing various research, talking with other districts regarding best practice, reviewing staff and student and community recommendations, and looking at embedded work currently occurring throughout the district within the multi-tiered system support, a district response plan was created. The overview of the plan can be found in the attached under requirement 10. We are looking at a focus in 4 areas. First, implement best practice, including alignment of resources and messaging, utilizing courageous conversations about race, embracing and engaging student and community voice in decision-making, and use of Wisconsin DPI's culturally responsive problem-solving model. Second, facilitate anti-racist classroom community, including building relationships, setting expectations, rules, and procedures, teaching expectation, rules, and procedures, and redirection strategies and classroom consequences. Staff members have the opportunity to engage in a variety of virtual professional development within the anti-racist classroom community approach, including anti-racist universal supports, bias, and systemic racism. Also look further on strategies for vulnerable decision points and how to engage student voice. Staff members can sign up for various book studies by authors including Bettina Love, Ibram X. Kendi, Glenn Singleton, among others. Third, focus on coaching school teams, including how to define specific behaviors and strategies, a structure to talk about race and bias, student voice in school and community decisions, and vulnerable decision points to interrupt bias. Virtual asynchronous modules have been created for each of those best practices for any staff member or team to engage with. School teams work to support individual classrooms who need additional support. Fourth, supporting administrators in their work in defining and classifying behaviors, their own vulnerable decision points when addressing bias and applying administrative resolutions, properly resolving referrals, considering alternative suspension, and repairing harm after discipline, including expansion and the use of restorative practices. Working with a grant with McCarthy Dressman, all school-based administrators will have the opportunity to participate in courageous conversations about race cohort, culminating in these administrators leading these same activities at the school level during the 2021-2022 school year. Within a grant with the Wisconsin Humanities Council, we'll be launching Project Community Care, or conversations around race and equity, to engage the Milwaukee community and the district in regular community conversations, book studies, a Milwaukee Voice podcast, documentary viewing, and all culminating in an MKE Talks event. Lastly, in collaboration with Teaching Tolerance, we will be piloting Project STARred, or students talking about the racial reality in education and discipline, engaging students in monthly conversations about race, the historical context of race in Milwaukee, and specific discipline policies and practices throughout the district. In the attachment, you will find the report number 10 submitted to the Office of Civil Rights on July 1st, 2020, with more details on everything I spoke about. Thank you for your time, and we are able to address any questions or concerns you have at this time.
All right, thank you, administration. Before I ask for committee members, I do believe we do have some people waiting to speak on this item. Madam Secretary, how many individuals are registered to speak on this item?
Madam Chair, we do have 11 individuals who have registered with written testimony on this item, who have submitted information in support of this item to our office, with one of the constituents registering informational. And then we have 2 individuals who are on the platform available to speak on this item who have pre-registered.
Thank you. If it's all right with the committee, I'll let those people, the members of the public speak. I'm seeing nods. Yeah. All right, Director Louise. Okay. Madam Secretary, we'll go to the public speakers first, please.
The first speaker on the platform registered to speak on this item is Larry Hoffman. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Larry Hoffman, Hoffman.
Thank you.
Micah has submitted testimony, and I concur with that testimony. Chair Taylor and committee, I would add my own. This administration has been working to fulfill the OCR resolution agreement for several years. It's time the board demands accountability for promises that have not been fulfilled yet. Please ask yourselves and the administration some questions such as these. Number 1, student discipline committees. The recommendations the students came up with were collected well before the pandemic. Why haven't they been implemented? Number 2, PBIS training. When will regular training once again be provided so that principals and faculty, both the new ones and the experienced ones, can get sharp at understanding and carrying out the good practices of PBIS? Number 3, courageous conversations about race. When is every teacher and administrator going to be required to attend that 2-day workshop? It's excellent. The Beyond Diversity seminars are excellent as well. Then there has to be continuous follow-up, so your employees know that the district is committed to carry out what these programs are all about, right? And finally, 4, resources. You just heard Mr. Jagaman. Does Mr. Jagaman have the personnel, the funding, and the authority he needs to carry out the plans he's been developing? In conclusion, I applaud President Miller for his statement in July decrying high-stakes standardized tests in the district. When you focus on making a district look good by increasing your test scores, and it's hard not to do that when you've got standardized testing,
30 seconds.
Student voices get ignored. Discipline, which we're talking about here, becomes more automatic and less responsive to students' needs. So if you won't stop the testing, at least stop pressuring the principals to raise their scores. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Jane Audette. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Thank you. Jane Audette, Audettete. I'm speaking on behalf of MICA. For 3 years, the MICA Education Task Force has studied, documented, and testified on the MPS OCR resolution response. This work is our contribution to efforts in MICA and Milwaukee to eliminate the school-to-prison pipeline. Working beyond the OCR requirements, the district discipline manager has engaged in significant research and contact with other districts around the country under OCR resolutions. He has created a comprehensive best practices plan to address racial discrimination in discipline and MPS. MICA supports it because the discriminatory discipline of Black and Brown students in MPS feeds the school-to-prison pipeline. MPS has not properly funded or resourced this work with the Office for Civil Rights since it began over 2 years ago. MICA Education, Leaders Igniting Transformation, and the Black Educators Caucus Milwaukee are all pressing for MPS to adopt this plan with adequate funding and resources. MICA Restoring Our Communities Task Force already works tirelessly at abolishing mass incarceration. MICA Coalition on Lead Emergency works to restore fresh water to our community. Those 2 task forces support this plan because they also are working hard to eliminate the school to prison pipeline. The African American Roundtable, of which MICA is a member, works actively to impact the policing system in Milwaukee, part of the school to prison pipeline. This plan supports their efforts. We need for the students of MPS to put this plan to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that was the last speaker on the platform.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And you said there were 11 more that had written testimony, and that will be also part of the public record as well, correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. Committee members, questions or comments on item number 3? I saw Director Miller and I think Director Baez in that order. Director Miller. You're muted.
I thought I unmuted. I apologize. Thank you, Director Taylor. I've looked at, over the last week and a half, I've looked at this report a number of times, and I find it very interesting, and just I have to keep reading it because there's so much information, and I appreciate that, everybody that put into it. And in certain ways, it really does, on this issue of suspension, it really does go to the, in my opinion, it's a beginning step in going into the core of, goes to the core of the school to prison pipeline in terms of in terms of dealing with behavioral issues. And so I salute it. So it does provide, it appears to me to provide a way forward for the work in a number of ways. So I actually want to make a motion that I would like the committee to entertain. One is, so I move that that the MPS board support the interventions and practices in the OCR report of July 2020 and require all MPS staff to make a concerted effort to significantly dismantle systems of racial and ethnic disproportionality and inequality. 2, that the administration report monthly to the board on the progress of the plan put forward in the July 1st, 2020 report to the Office of Civil Rights, OCR. 3, and that the monthly report will include the steps taken in each area outlined in the OCR report with benchmarks and timelines. And 4, that the administration will develop a monthly report on referrals, demarcating suspensions and expulsions resulting from those referrals to the board, similar to the 24 areas in the OCR report spelled out in section E, titled the Analysis for Behavioral Data for the 2019-2020 school year. The areas reported monthly will give an overall district summary of referrals, suspensions, and expulsions, including comparisons of Black, Latino and Latina, Indigenous, Asian, and white students, along with a breakdown for each school, including charter schools. I truly believe that if we begin to do this, one of the things that's going to come to be clear is that we need to increase the mandatory professional development time for staff members, for teachers and all staff members, if we're going to actually be able to tackle this issue. And at the same time, train ourselves not in corporate curriculum, not focused on standardized tests, but in the ways of creating cultures in our schools and classrooms that are really going to educate with rigor our students. So I just think that we have to increase the accountability of ourselves and show the data that's going to advance this. So I'm putting that motion forward.
Thank you, Director Miller. And I was just about to ask, was it a motion, and did we need a second, and then that you will be able to speak to it, but you've already spoken to the motion. Madam Secretary, do we need a second on this motion?
Madam Chair, given that we are at the committee level, we do not need a second for the motion, and I believe I have captured the motion.
Okay. Director Miller, would you like for Madam Secretary to read out the motion, or she believes she's captured it? I just want to make sure that everybody is understanding. I think you listed 5 to 6 steps so that it's clear.
I added some words. There were 4 steps. I apologize. I made an argument for it. those are the other things. But no, I did have 4 steps. Is that your understanding, Madam Secretary, that there were 4 steps that I was asking for?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you. All right, that is correct. I know Dr. Bias was in the queue. I would just ask if you will wait for 1 second, because I wanted to go to administration with the motion and the steps that Director Miller just stated. Thank you. Administration on the steps in the motion that was brought forth by Director Miller.
President, I'm sorry, Chair Taylor, members of the committee. A couple of things that I just want to take a look at with this motion here is the idea. Number one is that we are waiting to hear from the Office of Civil Rights. There are a number of things might be struck off of this list. We don't know as of yet. We are awaiting the findings because all of the information that we have submitted, we don't know exactly what will be left there. Also, a number of the things that we are talking about, I could say could be also added to our regional showcase that we do every month, as well as portions of the discipline plan as far as of the when we look at the school improvement plan, because we have a discipline portion that are there where we are looking at disproportionality. So I just see a number of different places that this could be sprinkled or added to the current piece that we have right now with the regional system of support and the regional showcase.
Thank you, administration. Director Miller, any feedback or comments?
Well, I clearly hear what the superintendent is saying. I don't think what he suggest. I think that what the superintendent is suggesting just adds to the motion. It adds to more areas. If, for example, if there's an area that we don't have to continue to focus on, that could be reported back, and we move forward as appropriate. So I'm not hearing any actual changes to the motion. It'll just be more clarity, and it'll show our progress as the motion asks for.
Thank you, Director Miller. Director Baez, and then after that, I'm going to pass the gavel to Vice Chair O'Halloran and put myself in the queue.
Yes, I had a couple of items that I wanted to raise. Well, first of all, speaking to the comments of President Miller, I do not think that the motion that has been presented in any way contradicts what the report really is proposing to do. I think it strengthens it. So with the I mean, with all due respect to the superintendent and others, I think this would help the district by making sure that we as a board take certain positions that sort of like continue to support the implementation of the OCR initiatives that are included in the July report. Now, going back to the July report, first of all, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the administration for this report. It's very detailed. I really been through it. I really been through its appendices or whatever you call them. I think you call them something else, but they are very revealing in terms of all the things that the district is doing. And I wish that I had seen this report before the resolution that I put together on suspensions with the help of board members. And it would have really that resolution would have really talked about, this report in more significant ways. I am a little bit concerned about why I didn't know about the report before, and I want to encourage the administration to think about this. MPS, the board, not the administration, the board, enter into an agreement with OCR in 2014. Okay, reports that sort of like gather and in many ways aggregate all the work, and there seems to be very good work, particularly as it relates to the more detailed systems of support and all the initiatives of staff development and all the initiatives of student engagement, etc. They're very good pieces. When I look at them in comparison to what other districts are doing in other parts of the country, I feel very proud. My God, this is very good. It's research-based. It's really supportive of what's going out there. But I was worried that, we didn't see the report until after it went to OCR, I think. And I strongly suggest that whenever we do end-of-year reports to the Office of Civil Rights, there is a legal obligation to first get that report to the board. Because as a board, we ought to be able to see what's in it and applaud it, and sometimes raise additional questions and suggestions and indicate maybe we can strengthen this here or strengthen that there. Because at the end, when OCR comes back, if they come back, they're going to come back to the board and they're going to ask, what role did you play? Did you send me these recommendations or these items, et cetera, and actually we didn't know. So I applaud the good content of the report, and I fully support it. And I think that the motion by Director Miller further supports that, because it's basically saying, we as a board want to support the implementation of the items in this report, in a significant way. But look at the other thing we're saying. We're saying things that follow up on what some of the speakers before us tonight and some of the communications we have received, that we still have a lot to do in terms of ensuring that we require, that we mandate all staff to be involved in this. When I read through the report and the good things that have been done, I had questions. And some of the questions had to do with the fact that when you do things in a voluntary basis, many of the people who are participating in the process of creating the inequality fail to participate, fail to attend workshops. The people who want to do better attend workshops, but the people who have in fact created most of the problem do not. Okay, so when we do not have a mandatory element to what we're saying to OCR we will do, I think it takes away from the report. So I support the idea of ensuring that we make the implementation of this report as supportive as possible and as mandatory as possible, and that we get everybody in our school system that is contributing to this problem that we have of this disproportionality in suspensions and expulsions and in the treatment of behavior by school and as a district as a whole, that we end that we continue to work in the direction of ending that. So I wanted to say, please, let's make this mandatory. The second point is the resources item. We, during the budget process this last time, I recall, we did not place enough emphasis on the issue of resources that ought to go to bringing down the disproportionality of treatment and the issues of race and everything else and anti-racism in the district. We put more resources in other areas than we did there. Okay. Now, these are important areas where we put the resources, but in the future, if we know what the report is saying, if we discuss it, if we have a rigorous understanding of it and of its elements, we ought to be able to say, you know, in this next budget process, we're going to dedicate so much to addressing this particular issue. And we're going to dedicate so much to more trauma workers, and we're going to dedicate so much to more support systems, and we're going to dedicate so much to making sure that we have an office adequately equipped to implement all the things that are being said in this report. So resources are very important. And I have another question for details, and I'll ask that later, but I wanted to comment on that right now. I think that the report, the OCR report, should have come to us so that we could strengthen it, so that we can defend it all the way, okay? And I do not think that the motion made by Director Miller is counter to that purpose.
Thank you, Director Baez. Administration, any comments?
Yes, Chair Taylor, members of the committee. One of the things since I've been superintendent, I brought this report in 1/16 of 18, brought it back again 1/25 of 18. In 2019, I brought it in April, brought it in May, and then at the end of this year, 2020, 2/27 of 2020, I brought this report. There's ongoing reports that we do all the time to OCR, and we have never before brought a report to the board before we send it in. And if that is something that you want us to start doing, we don't have an issue with doing just that. But the idea is that we are following protocol that we have in place, and we have moved forward to move swiftly through. This has not been a secret. Ever since I've been in this chair, I have brought this report to all the powers that be. So, and as far as there has been growth that has been made with this particular piece as well. Is it the growth that we all want to see? The answer is no. I also feel that the office is properly resourced to be able to do the work that it needs to be done. We have PBIS, we have the equity department, we have Black and Latino male department, we have violence prevention. We have a number of things that we pull together to work through this process and everything that we do around this process as well. So I really feel that we have put the monies towards what needs to happen. We, by all means, are looking at ways to make sure that things are mandatory. We don't just willy-nilly allow people to not complete stuff and not do it. We follow up on those things as they happen. And to sit here to say that you will get 100% compliance on every single item throughout this district is something that we're working for, but we ain't there yet.
Director Baez, follow up, and I also heard you say you had another question.
Yes. Okay. I want to make clear something. Look, what we have received are bits and pieces of the implementation. This is an end of year report. What I was speaking to is this report. As an end of year report, we should know what goes to the Office of Civil Rights. That is a legal obligation. I'm not going to play games with that. That is a legal obligation, okay, that the districts has. If you send an end of year report, that really reflects on us. It is all of us. There are things that board members that are engaged in policy making and what have you may have that are necessary inputs to a report, because when the report goes to OCR, the expectation, the assumption is that we are supporting all of what is being said in there. So I'm just going to stick with the idea that an end of year report is different from bits and pieces that we have received in terms of implementation, which are fine, which are great. But I had not seen the aggregate of this until I read this report. With all due respect, I didn't see that. The issue of resources is an issue that as a board, we need to consider, okay? It may go beyond what the administration would like to do. And we need to make decisions about how we distribute the resources of the system to support different kinds of initiatives. And this initiative is huge. It is extremely important that we implement an anti-racist strategy that is culturally embedded, that it's helpful to the kids that attend our schools and to the adults that work with them. These adults, when I look at the progress in terms of the report, I understand we have a long way to go, no doubt. But as long as people are not required to be a part of the solution, to be a part of bringing this together, we are going to continue to experience some problems. As a board member, I think we need to know, and this will do it. And an end of year report is different from different pieces that come to us. So that's it. Okay, and my comment. A question. I look at the report per se, and I look at issues like on page 17. On page 17 of the report, it is stated that a lesson, the student lessons, etc., in terms of the student discipline committee, consider the purpose of suspensions and possible alternatives to suspensions, etc. Yet we had students in the student committees input process that spoke specifically to the issue that the district needs to re-examine discipline practices and policies, providing more alternatives to suspensions. The kids are saying that. They're saying we need to do this. Now, we have systems that are doing that right now, but they're not mandatory. They are generally voluntary, and it happens to differ incredibly by school. So when I look at the reports by schools that are provided in some of the appendices, I see a huge differential in terms of schools. Some schools do very well in reporting minutes of how they got kids involved and how they got more staff to participate in trainings and things like that. And some schools do not, okay? So there is a huge differential in that, as revealed in that appendix itself. So my question was, why not? And I think I know why not, because it wasn't required. It wasn't mandatory, okay? And the other point that I wanted to raise is that when we look at student engagement, again, it shows a huge differential by school. There are schools that really go at it and schools that do not. I'm not being critical right now of the administration in any way. What you're doing is very good. I'm saying, how do we as board members support the fact that this has to be consistent throughout? Young people told us consistency is very important in how you do this, okay? I think that as a board member, we can strengthen the intent of this report, and we can support its very detailed aspects and initiatives and interventions. And let's make sure that we look at the cost of that, and we look at the cost of not doing that, and that we distribute our resources when time comes up again during the budget process to make sure that we put the resources to support that. That's all.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, what was the question, Director Baez?
The question is that what I'm seeing here is that the alternatives to suspensions at their schools, folks are talking about it, but it's all voluntary. There is no mandatory aspect to this. Okay.
Administration.
Go ahead.
Yes, so I'll address a couple of your questions there, Dr. Baez. So one, with the student discipline committees, really diving into those conversations with the students is going to be a new best practice going forward. This last school year, we had schools discussing various concerns and recommendations at the school level around discipline, climate, culture. This year, they have specific lessons. For example, one of them is they actually pull up the district code of conduct and have students look at specific behaviors and talk about what does a fight look like, and have students engage in those conversations to kind of give them the lens and the framework, because that was specific feedback from the students and the student discipline committee facilitators that we're not really getting that guidance of what that looks like. So we're trying to help them by creating that framework to have those conversations as it kind of like goes up, and then they input those conversations into Qualtrics so we can see that at our level. So I would argue that that's kind of like newer work where in the past they've expressed concerns. And in terms of alternatives to suspensions, we did have those 99 administrators attend 2 days of restorative practices for administrators. There's more that attended one and not the other due to COVID. So we really are having administrators engage in that administrator's addendum, which, if you have seen, looks at specific behaviors, and then within the code of conduct is giving administrators a breadth of resources. There are some things that are non-negotiables that must be essential services referral and come here to be heard. There are other behaviors that have like an area that they can handle at the school level, hold a repair and harm circle, have a parent meeting, provide resources to the teacher. So that's really what that administrative addendum, which was created with staff input, student input, community input, provides them. So really reaching administrators at fidelity of understanding that work, I think, would be our personal at the district's level next step with that. But we're really on the student level, getting them to have those conversations about students are kind of confused. They don't maybe know what the code of conduct is, what the rights are, what the policies are. And then how can they create that two-way conversation at the school level with staff, like to bring those up. And I think virtually does actually open some doors where can students record themselves having these conversations, or can they virtually go into a staff meeting and share out these conversations? So I do think that having a virtual setting kind of might open some of those doors for conversations.
Director Baez.
No, I would prefer that other board members comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I have put myself in a queue, but I'll give leeway to Director Peterson and then come back for Vice Chair O'Halloran to take the gavel. Director Peterson.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I appreciate the conversation and the report from the administration. I learned a lot from it. I just want to mention the question about resources. Certainly that's an issue that has been brought up. And I'd suggest there's two aspects for us to look at. One is what are our current resources do we have? We have several different programs. I won't list them. I think we're all familiar with various programs. How are they interconnected? How are they working together? How are they collaborating? Or how might we improve that collaboration? One thing that would be helpful for me as a board member is just a diagram of where those programs sit in the administration into central services. And so that would be helpful. And then we could have some more conversation about that and get input from those people. So that's number one. The second thing is, I know that we actually, in the budget, thanks to the referendum passing, put in a significant amount of positions, social workers, counselors, psychologists, ethnic studies, restorative practices teachers. And it would be, I would appreciate it if the superintendent could have that information by the board meeting, maybe how successful have we been thus far in fulfilling those positions. I know we're working under a pandemic and it's very difficult, but I think if we look at our current sources and look at try to fulfill all those others that we budgeted for, it would be a good first step towards providing the resources necessary at the school level.
Administration.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, yes, we will get that information to you, Director Peterson, and members of the board prior to the full board meeting. We have all of those positions posted. Currently in the interview process for a number of them as of today. We were at 145 school-based type of positions, but we would have to go back and tease out social workers, psychologists, and I think school counselors was not in that particular group as well. But when we talk about art, music, physical education, library, media specialists, early childhood education, and a number of other those positions, we are now all in that number of 145 that we are currently working on. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jagman to kind of talk about the blueprint that we have in place and where you can find the document that you requested earlier in this particular document and the work that has gone on in order to make that happen. John.
Thank you, Dr. Fosley, members of the committee. Yes, so starting in June, I believe was the first day, we have, it's a mouthful, sorry. So it's the District Discipline Disproportionality Leadership Team that is meeting monthly. We actually had our September meeting today. It has the supervisor, the manager equivalent of each of those areas, like Director Peterson mentioned, violence prevention is part of it, specialized services, BMLA, PBIS, restorative practices, equity. It goes on, there's probably about 14, 15 members of that community schools as part of that. We meet monthly. We kind of have a set framework of, we look at updated discipline data, even in a virtual setting where have been some discipline data. We look at that, kind of look at our notices. We all touch base on updates from each of our areas, look for areas of alignment, look for areas of unalignment, if you will, and then kind of specifically look at what do we need from each other, from each of our teams. So like that's kind of like the overall structure. The actual diagram of the alignment, it is one of the attachments. We can make sure you get that and how everyone lies within an office and a department. So we do have resources in different departments and different teams. That district discipline disproportionality team is the structure we have created. We have a little, like a networking site that the team has that we put each other's professional development on, resources on. And then when we meet, we touch base on all that. So the framework for all those groups to collaborate is there. It's a newer framework, so I think we just continue down that road because we've been meeting once a month since June to get that alignment there.
Director Peterson.
Thank you very much.
All right. The gap, is that it, Director Peterson? Let me muted this up again.
Yes.
Thank you. The gavel is being passed to Vice Chair O'Halloran.
So noted.
Director Taylor.
Thank you. My colleagues have asked many of the questions I was going to ask or put some of the comments. For the OCR, this is something that continues to come up several times throughout in the community and with some of the colleagues or some of the employees within the MPS district. Once again, I talked about at the pre-pace how I was glad to see that we had next steps. And I'm so happy that we did not have another resolution come out in reference to a resolution that was passed already. I would like us to have actionable steps in implementation. So I thank the administration for having those 4 steps that deals with implementation and Director Miller, because I do believe we do need to update monthly. A lot of the times we received this information, and I understand the administration said they brought it back maybe 3 or 4 to 5 times over the past 2 years, but this is something that is really serious. And if we are putting in the work, then I think the public, the employees, the students as well need to see what's being done and not it kind of thrown at us maybe twice a year in a format that seems to be a lot of words and people are not really truly understanding the impact or the next steps for implementation. And some of it kind of seemed like we are repeating some of the things that we are stated that we are doing, but to show that we are actually implementing those with the statistics, the data, and the know-how and actionable steps, I think is something that we should be putting forth. And when I think about us bringing it back monthly, it also gives the chance for us to see the updates because Director Baez did mention something about an annual report going to OCR. And I understand in the past we've gotten them maybe every quarter, but I myself also will have liked to see that annual report necessarily all together before it went in. But it's good that we do have it now so that we can kind of go through it and make sure that we are all aligning. Once again, the OCR is something that is within the district, but it's also something that the board has to approve or not approve or some of the next steps. And I would like to see us working more together instead of seeming like we're working apart with this, along with some of the community members. One of the questions I was going to ask you guys did answer it, but I just want to tap on it a little bit more. Was the question with the students in the disciplinary group, and how I know COVID did hit, and I think one of the public speakers spoke to this as well too. For that information and data that we did get, how was it implemented into next steps? And then also, we do talk a lot about the students. What I'll do, but I also want to ensure that the staff is implemented in that too, because once again, if the students are implemented or part of the team of strategies, but the staff is not included in, then it's just us working with the students, and there's still a gap to connect our students, our parents, and our staff all together to ensure that the district is moving forward. No, it's a little lengthy, but.
Administration?
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so thank you, Chair Taylor. Let me know if I'm addressing your question as I understand it. So some of the recommendations that were recommended have already been implemented, were in the works of being implemented before COVID, and some, as the speaker addressed, were halted because of COVID. So one of the big ones was the upcoming Student Leadership Summit, which we are going to have in November, which will be virtual. We are engaging those student groups currently to ask them what do they want as breakouts during that Student Leadership Summit. Like, what breakout sessions do they want to engage in? What conversations do they want to have? We're reaching out to any staff member, any team within the district, community partners as well to host. We're thinking 30, 45-minute breakout sessions for interested students to sign up for and go to. So we're trying to get more student voice into that particular event. Again, one of the big things that came up at the student committees last year was they want to use that space to talk about the history of Milwaukee. Kind of, we're raised, so like, can they talk about what redlining is, pull up old Milwaukee redlining maps and look at how funding for Milwaukee transportation has been racially divided throughout the years. And so kind of supporting those facilitators in that work. So we have a monthly email that goes out to student discipline facilitators. We have a monthly networking time where they can log in, talk with each other, speak with me, kind of provide that support. And we have, and the link is in there, a networking site that has all those mini lessons that are just Google Word documents they can download, adjust to fit their needs. But it has links, again, to use redlining as an example, has a link to an old Milwaukee redlining map. So you can pull it up, look where your school is, look where your community is, see how it was coded up years back, and see what that means in terms of resources that have been filtering into that community throughout the time. So that's a big one that I do feel we have embraced. And again, working with Teaching Tolerance, we got a grant through them. It's brand new, it hasn't started yet. We're reaching out to schools for interest, creating those conversations at the school level. So those would be student created projects. So I don't even really want to provide ideas to schools because I'll help them through, but I want them to be student focused. But for example, a school could say, hey, we want to buy 50 copies of a book. Dear Martin, for example, is a book that is a high school level book. They might buy 50 copies of that book, read it as a student group, create kind of like a guidebook of conversations, and then maybe they'll work with English 9 classes in second semester, and each of them break off and go into an English 9 classroom and have that conversation. They might create a virtual night or an in-person night someday at their school where different individuals talk about the community. Whatever student-focused and student-created activities they want to create. That grant with Teaching Tolerance helps to provide some of the monetary resources for them to kind of organize that. So that's going to be a big part of what we want those groups to do. Again, that's based on some of their input. And then creating that conversation, like you said, at the school level, some of the best practices that are out there that teachers use in general is Flipgrid, which is a free resource where students can just click a button on their computer, record their voice and their face on specific topics. So we're, again, working with those facilitators and how to do it, but it's very technically pretty easy. They could post a question for those groups that could even be shared with other students. How is virtual learning for you? Or do you feel like you are part of a virtual community in your classrooms? Kids just hit record, they record it. You can have it set up that it comes to just me as the facilitator because I want to make sure that it's okay, and then I can publicly post it, or it can be publicly posted. And then working with that facilitator, how can you create a space with your administrator and your staff where staff can then go and view those? Or can staff meetings are all virtual now? Is there a space for students to virtually go in for 5-10 minutes? Just give an update on what your teams are doing. What are some concerns you have? What are recommendations you have? Or, hey, I heard you did this great lesson looking at funding of Milwaukee County Transit over the years and how it was affected by race. Would you care to share out 5 minutes what that looked like? So it's the framework is there. We're really working with those facilitators to give them the skills, the framework to really kind of embrace that student group as a great, powerful kind of force within the school. So if that answered everything.
Director Taylor?
Yeah, last follow-up. I know we just talked about students, staff, in administration, but also I know also having parents and community members more involved and aware of exactly what OCR is and some of the implementation steps. I know we talked about, because we're in this virtual world, maybe creating something where they can get this information and get educated, as well as being there for Q&A. We talked about it, but do we foresee that happening in the very near future?
Administration?
Oh, sorry. Yes, Chair Taylor and members of the board, thank you for the question. I forgot to bring that up because that was newly updated. Yes, we have a flyer that we are looking to get out there to have a virtual community conversations, because community conversations is the language used in the resolution, so we're sticking with that. Virtual community conversations starting in October. It'll be a virtual link that'll be shared. Community members can come on. We're looking as the framework to kind of be 15-ish minutes of just updates, and maybe if there's concerns around a specific policy or practice or explanation of what restorative practice is, an explanation of what the Bill of Rights is, taking that time to do that, and then really opening it up for questions, comments, and concerns that they can then bring up. And there is also on that a way for any community member to bring up concerns or questions at any time.
Yes.
We've created a system where they can submit that at any time. It comes to me and others, and then we can address them individually as well. So we're hoping to start that in October.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you like me to pass the gavel back,
Sure.
Taylor? Okay.
Oh, noted.
The gavel has been passed. Thank you for that. Any other committee members have any questions or concerns on item number 3? None that I.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Vice.
I believe you have President Miller raising his hand, and then Director. No? Oh, I'm sorry. I saw movement.
But Vice Chair O'Halloran.
Thank you. 2 things. I'll try to keep it brief. So if we were to make training mandatory, do we have any estimates for what that would cost? So that we. Pardon?
Vice Chair O'Halloran, I think he was calling one of his staff people in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if we were to make training mandatory, it would be nice to have an estimate so that, as Director Baez had pointed out, we can plan for that in the next budget cycle if we don't already have that earmarked. And then I was just hoping that we could have the motion read again so that I can hear it and ask any questions on that.
Administration.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, we will be more than happy to get back to you with a total cost. but we have money set aside for any professional development that's available this year. So anything that we have earmarked, we have money set aside to make happen from a professional development standpoint. But going forward, we will get that information to you.
Thank you, administration. Are you saying before the whole board or before the next PACE meeting? Or Vice Chair O'Halloran, were you specific with when did you want those numbers?
I guess before the full board meeting would be helpful. I'm just trying to understand, because we have these conversations about resources and about PD, and I'm trying to, basically what I'm trying to get to is what is the stumbling block and how do we remove those challenges to move this work forward?
Thank you for clarification, administration.
Chair Taylor, members of the committee, like I said, we have dollars set aside for this year. We will be doing monies PD for the upcoming year, and we could provide that.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Miller.
Just a procedural point on that, on what Director O'Halloran is asking for. I would ask that the superintendent address that in his superintendent remarks, along with what Director Peterson had asked for. That way we don't have to pull the item unless a board member wants to pull the item, that's fine. But that way we don't necessarily have to pull the item to get those reports that won't necessarily have a direct bearing on the immediacy of the items.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we have a motion to, is that Madam Secretary?
Members of the committee, another in reference to President Miller's point, another area in which the administration continues to provide the board with information requested at committee meetings is they would submit the information to the Office of Board Governance, and we would get that directly to board members prior to the meeting to ensure that you had a chance to review it prior to, and any questions could be asked during the superintendent's report to the board.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. There is a motion on the floor. I'm pretty sure, hopefully we all remember the 4 points. Any other comments from committee members or administration before we call the motion? I don't see any. Madam Secretary, can you call the roll on Director Miller's motion?
On Director Miller's motion, which reads, I move that, number 1, that the board support the interventions and practices in the OCR report of July 2020 and require all MPS staff to make a concerted effort to significantly dismantle systems of racial and ethnic disproportionality and inequality. And number 2, the administration report monthly to the board on the progress of the plan put forth in on July 1st, 2020, the report to the Office of Civil Rights. Number 3, that the monthly report will include the steps taken in each area outlined in the OCR report with benchmarks and timelines. And number 4, that the administration will develop a monthly report on referrals, demarcating suspensions and expulsions resulting from those referrals to the board, similar to the 24 areas in the OCR report spelled out in section E, titled The Analysis for Behavioral Data for the 2019-20 school year. The areas reported monthly will give an overall district summary of referrals, suspensions, and expulsions, including comparison data of Black, Latino, Latina, Indigenous, Asian, and white students, along with a breakdown for each school, including charter schools. On the motion as read into the record, Vice President Baez.
Aye.
President Miller.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Woodward. No. Chair Taylor.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, 1 no. The motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, next item.
Madam Chair, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
Thank you, committee members and administration and the public for joining us for September's PACE meeting. No other items are on the agenda. The meeting is adjourned. Have a great night.
Good night to all.
Night.